No, Susie, you were having that issue because I think that might be another Susie Taylor. Anyway, we'll know who you are if you introduce yourself in the chat. Thank you so much. I'm going to go ahead and kick things off. My name's Caroline Nickerson, and I'm from the SciStarter team. We're doing this webinar / workshop / informal discussion is really targeted at graduate students at Montana State University. But we opened it to all because we have such a stellar panel who are going to have a discussion today about different aspects of the citizen science world and its relevance to graduate students. But I'm going to go ahead and ask you all a question. I'm going to allow our panelists to vote because why not? I think they'll have some yes answers here. But I want to know, have you heard of citizen science before? And that doesn't mean like I RSVP'd for this event and I know what citizen science is. It's, do I understand what citizen science is? Oh my gosh, we have 100%. I'm going to end the poll and share those results. Everyone has heard of citizen science before. Cool. Good to know. Now I want to know, are you connected to Montana State University? So we have a lot of people who are, which is great. Good stuff. All right, I'm going to give you a few more seconds to vote. Get those votes in. So we'll end the poll here. Looks like almost everybody is affiliated with Montana State, which is awesome. Good to know. And let's see, I think we have one more introductory question. Are you a graduate student? So answer yes, answer no. If you're unsure, answer that too. I wanted to put that category in there just in case, you never know. Okay, everyone is. 100% of the people, all the attendees in this event are graduate students. So I think we have a pretty clear idea of our audience today. So today's panel, we have, so I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen and then I'll pass it off to Karen. Dr. Karen Cooper from North Carolina State University. But we have folks from all these different places. So NC State University, Dr. Karen Cooper and her PhD student, Bradley Alf, are here from NC State University, which is a proud citizen science campus. We have Darren Ash and Darlene Cavalier from Arizona State University, and they're both with the School for the Future of Innovation and Society. Darlene is also the founder of SciStarter, and I'm part of the SciStarter team. And then, of course, we have Susie Taylor from Montana State University and pretty much an audience of exclusively MSU graduate students, which is great. And Karen, I'll just advance your slides if you don't mind. You can just tell me next slide. Might as well. And you are muted.
Okay, yeah, I was saying that's fine. And hello, everyone. Yeah, it's exciting. I haven't really spoken to just a group of graduate students before. And what I want to do is talk about kind of just the scope and breadth of citizen science, and especially to help us think about all the different ways that it can be designed and what that means in an academic context. And so I have that little joke here that it's kind of like, it's a very multidisciplinary task to carry out citizen science research or research through the citizen science kind of methods. And so it's kind of like this multidisciplinary peg and trying to fit it into this round hole of academia. And so it's not actually always a very good fit, but hopefully academia and sort of the scientific enterprise and what's acceptable and whatnot and what's expected is actually rapidly evolving and changing in ways that really do rely on and sort of make it the norm to rely on public engagement. And then I'm just boasting my credentials there a little bit.
Yeah, and that book you see right there, Karen co-authored that with Darlene, who's here. Yeah. And this book, the citizen science book, I have read it quite a few times. I bring it with me when I'm on planes. It reminds me of the beauty of citizen science and the scope of it. So both of these are good reads, heartily recommend. And as you can see, there's NC State University and SciStarter. So Karen's a big part of the SciStarter team as well.
Yeah. If you're looking for examples, in my first book there, I cover different disciplines, and I tell the story of scientific discoveries in different disciplines based on citizen science. And then the field guide is like a really great how to get started as a participant. Anyway, oh, so you can advance. So my background is in ornithology, and that's how I first got deeply involved in citizen science, was that I was at the Cornell Lab of Ornithology for almost 15 years. And this animation here of barn swallow migration is from their program called eBird. And if you've heard of, since everyone's heard of citizen science, I'm guessing people have heard of eBird and probably iNaturalist and those kinds of projects. And these are iconic in the way that they're structured for making it easy for people with different types of hobby and lay expertise to share their observations to a massive database, and then to mobilize those data so that they can be displayed and used by scientists, by managers, and by bird watchers in this particular way. But there's a few myths I like to bust about this, because a lot of people think that this is only possible because of the internet and because of smartphones. But one of the things that I like to emphasize is that this actually isn't entirely new. And you can advance my slide. And this is an example of really the same kind of map. It's just not animated, and it's not birds, it's whales. And it's a whale chart from the mid 1800s. But if we were able to zoom in and see it, I don't have the resolution to do that. But anyway, each quadrant is filled with basically presence absence data. It's the number of ship days in each quadrant and the number of whale sightings. And it's by month. And so it shows basically the seasonal migrations of right whales and sperm whales in the oceans. Anyway, so it's just to show it really is like the same as eBird. It just was produced a really long time ago. And you can find reference to this in the book Moby Dick. And the fellow that set this up was Matthew Fontaine Maury. He was in the US Navy at the time. And it was all information crowdsourced from ships that were sailing the high seas. You can advance. So I like to emphasize that that this, what we now call citizen science, is really something that has been around a long time. And so here's just the timeline in ornithology, which doesn't go back as far as we see with whales. But there's been projects really since around the turn of the 19th century. And I guess most iconic is probably the Christmas bird count. What I like to point out here is that if you look at like the recent sort of blossoming of citizen science, it really began in the 60s with the environmental movement. But if you look at when Web 2.0 tools became available, that's like in the, I don't know what it is, what, around 2000 or so, or late 1990s. And so it isn't just the internet. It isn't just always new technologies that have been sparking citizen science. Well, we can see here, I show those binoculars. The reason the Christmas bird count was possible, it was driven by a lot of conservation concerns, but also by new technologies. These opera glasses became really affordable to more people. So they could switch from a hunt, that's how you used to bird watch, you'd shoot a bird and you could look at it really well and identify it in your hand, to being able to do that with binoculars. Anyway, so there's always this combination of technological advances and social movements. And in this case for birds, really Silent Spring and the launch of that environmental movement that it sparked also sparked a lot of avian citizen science. So you could go to the next slide. And so we see citizen science in a lot of different fields. And I don't know the majors of all who's attending. It'll be interesting to learn more about that. But there's amateur, they call them amateur astronomers. It's not meant to sound derogatory, but amateur astronomers who are really vital to a lot of astronomy research. The Ginny McCormick picture here, that's her telescope. She lives in New Zealand. She has around the same number of publications that I have, around 70 or so. And she has been an integral part of these sort of observing networks that have made a lot of cool discoveries. And so she works like a day job from 9 in the morning till 5 at night. And then she observes from 9 at night till 5 in the morning. Anyway, and then a lot of meteorology and a lot of what our oldest ground-based weather data for understanding climate change comes from volunteer monitors. And this fellow here, Richard Hendrickson, he's kind of a classic example of those that volunteer with NOAA. He started volunteering when he was 18, and he continued monitoring his weather station daily in Long Island until he died at age 103. In this picture, he's 101. So there's citizen science projects that are super long-term. The NOAA project for their weather monitors, they give like badges. I think at the 20-year mark, like the 50-year mark, like they just have these like super long-term observers. Anyway, if you go to the next slide. So I have a quiz for you, and this will come back around to citizen science, but so here are a bunch of different species, and I don't know if your field is in the area of biodiversity or not, but anyway, take a guess if you want, of which of these is not like the others. Yeah, you can post it. That's good.
1 sec. I'm trying to make it so panelists can vote because I want to vote. Give me 1 sec.
Okay.
Okay. Let me relaunch the poll. Allow panelists to vote.
So take a look, and they're all have referenced by their letter.
All right, everybody vote. And panelists, you are free to vote as well. Which of these is not like the others?
So I don't know if people still grew up with that, but it used to be like a Sesame Street thing. You know, which of these, anyway, so it was like a little mental challenge.
Ooh, this is tough. Susie, what do you think? Which of these is not like the others?
You are putting me on the spot, Caroline.
I am.
I was trying to, oh my gosh. I guess C. B, and this is a really lame explanation. I wonder if the species doesn't exist anymore.
That is a really good guess. And C is extinct. That is true. Do you want to go ahead and reveal the poll?
Yeah, I'll end the poll now. So a few people haven't voted yet. This is your last chance, everybody. Get your votes in. 3.
Like in citizen science, it's optional participation.
Yes. Last chance. 3, 2, 1, and we're gonna end the poll. And we'll share our results. So it looks like the majority, about 50% of folks, think it's F.
Right. And so the majority is correct, which that is actually another crowdsourcing phenomena, but I'm not going to get into that today. So yeah, and that's bluebirds. And the reason they're different from the others is that all the others are extinct and bluebirds are actually thriving. And if you go to my next slide, it's because bluebirds, there is a subset of bird watchers who absolutely, absolutely love bluebirds and who collect data on bluebirds, who put up homes for bluebirds, who are sort of the quintessential, I guess, citizen scientist when it comes to birds. And so I really just wanted it in there as an example of the power of citizen science, not just for advancing knowledge. Actually, I've used data on bluebird monitors for understanding a lot of different aspects about egg laying and clutch size patterns and a lot of different ecological sort of things. And bluebirders have used their data for advancing conservation and helping bluebirds thrive. Okay, you can go to the next slide. I guess I just wanted to have people guess on this one too, is what disciplines do you think have benefited from citizen science? And there's a few listed there: oceanography, microbiology, epidemiology, biochemistry. You can guess all of the above. You could guess none of the above. What do you think? And I'm curious just to know what you think, because a lot of times people get familiar with citizen science in one specific project, like maybe like Christmas bird count, and they might think that that is what citizen science is. And so, not to give away answers, but I'm just curious to how you think it might have impacted other fields.
I can tell you that everyone who has voted so far has voted for all of the above.
Okay. Well, I mean, we can, if people, unlike our democracy, we're going to just cut off the votes and we might not count them all. So yeah, all of the above. And that is correct. You can go to the next slide. And just to continue with Matthew Fontaine Maury and what I mentioned with the whales and the whale migration, the other crowdsourcing project he started was to collect wind and current data from sailors. And so that was really the start of the field. The entire field of oceanography began with what we would today call citizen science. And it was in the sailors' best interest to share their observations, to take observations in the logbooks that he provided and to share those, because he would bring it all together and update these charts, these navigation charts, and it made sailing safer and faster for everyone. And what I have there is a quote from a sailor that said, "Until I took up your work, I had been traversing the ocean blindfolded." And what I really like about that quote is that's how I think about science, that we just have a lot of blindfolds on. And when we carry out science, and especially with crowdsourcing, it's just to strip away these blindfolds so we can see patterns that were always there, right? We're not inventing things. We're just seeing patterns that were not clear to us before. And sometimes there's patterns that a scientist cannot see on their own, and they need observations from hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of people. So if you go to the next slide. So really right now we see citizen science in really every field that I have been looking in. I see some degree of advances that are made through different forms of citizen science. You can go to the next slide. So I was trying to make this interactive. So anyway, here's another one for you to guess at. Which of these projects, some of which you may have heard of, I don't know, which do you think has had the most volunteers in a given year? So
and you can find all these projects on SciStarter. I know we'll get to this later in the presentation, but the SciStarter Project Finder is your way to search for these opportunities.
That's right. So there's eBird, Philo, iNaturalist, iSpot, which is sort of the British version of iNaturalist, and Galaxy Zoo. Philo and Galaxy Zoo are online projects, and the other ones are nature-based projects. So give it your best guess.
Get your votes in, everybody. I'm about to close the poll. 3, 2, 1, and we'll end the poll. Share results.
All right, so most people guessed eBird, probably because of my bird bias. Second was iNaturalist, and then Galaxy Zoo, and then iSpot and Philo were tied for last place. So the 8% that guessed Philo were the ones who were correct. And they didn't get there on their own. It's kind of, I think it's kind of a cool story. And I'm mentioning it kind of just to show like the weird variety that is out there happening in the landscape of citizen science. And so really Philo is an online project that is about doing multi-sequence alignment, which is like a genomic sort of process. It looks like this on the left. It helps like build these phylogenies. And they're focusing on that with gut microbes. And so right now they've been analyzing data from another citizen science project called American Gut, where kind of like it shows there, people submit samples, and it's not their bird observations. It's just samples. It's poop. So, and that gets sequenced in the lab. Anyway, and so with a lot of citizen science, there's sometimes too much data to handle. And in this case, there's too much poop to handle, too much microbes, and there's a lot of this processing and this need for multi-sequence alignment. Well, so Philo is a project that's been doing that, and they were going for 10 years. And in 10 years, they were able to they recruited about 350,000 participants, which is a lot. And on average, participants, they call them players because it's like a game, did about solved about 5 puzzles per player. If you go to the next slide. But the innovation that happened recently is that they partnered with game designers. And I don't know if there's any gamers out there. Borderlands is a game. It's a first-person shooter, looter kind of game. And you can see it down there in the bottom is what it looks like if you're in the game. And what they did, there's a thing called Borderlands Science. And there's activities that they put in this like retro kind of arcade looking kind of thing. And they modified Philo to be like an arcade game. And players, there's certain ways they can level up their game, like get new skins and stuff. And they do it by doing Philo. And so with that, in like a 3-month period of time, they had over 1 million active participants. And they had on average been completing 50 puzzles per player. So it was like an order of magnitude step up. Anyway, and I think we're going to see a lot more of those kinds of things and citizen science integrated into different aspects of our lives. You can go to the next.
Yeah, and really quickly on that, both Philo and Borderlands are on the SciStarter project finder. So those project leaders have listed them on SciStarter for other folks to discover. If you want to read more about them, there's an article a few weeks back on the SciStarter blog, as well as SciStarter's blog that we share with Discover Magazine. So there's a whole world for you all to explore, and we're really excited for you. But I'll let Karen get back to fungal diversity.
I was just going to give a few more examples, and then and one is, with mushrooms, and kind of just to say that like there's a lot of biodiversity projects that involve taking photos, right? Like iNaturalist, like involve photo documenting things, which is super. It's with a geolocation. There's some that even bring it a step further where people collect specimens. Like in this project, they learn to dry the fungi and send it in for sequencing. And then there also is software, and these volunteers teach each other to use this software to actually analyze those sequences and start to identify a lot of different fungi that is in the soil, like part of soil microbes. Like it's pretty amazing sort of the how advanced some citizen science volunteers can be. Go ahead. And then I just wanted to give a shout out too to, there's so many different types of hobbyists involved that are helping different fields. And so distributed computing, which refers to the way different networks of computers are connected, right? So the most powerful computers are not like big mainframes or servers. They're really these distributed networks, and they help solve a lot of these sort of computationally difficult problems. And a lot of those problems are in biochemistry. Anyway, the hobbyists are called overclockers. They started with SETI, the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence. There's an example of an overclocker. They like really try to soup up their computers to really be powerful because they compete in these overclocking networks, or sometimes teams form. I was mentioning earlier, we have a citizen science club at NC State, and this semester they're talking about creating an NC State distributed computing team so that if we put all the student computers together, we could maybe make it to the top of the charts on some of these programs like Folding at Home or Rosetta at Home, which are really helping solve these problems about how proteins fold, which is really fundamental to understanding certain diseases. I have a little picture there of the bronies because a lot of these teams exist, and some of them are fandom. So bronies, I don't know if people are familiar with bronies, but they're typically young men that just really love My Little Pony. And they make fan fiction and fan art, but they also do service together, and they do these distributed computing teams. They're often top of the charts in Rosetta at Home. So you can go on. And in the wildlife field, there's a lot going on there. Citizen Science Grid is out of the University of North Dakota. And they do a lot of distributed computing, and they also do a lot of online. They have a lot of automated cameras that are photographing waterfowl nesting behavior, and also a lot of cameras. And they need people to go through the videos and the still images and do a lot of tagging and annotating. And it's actually really fun. Anyway, and they call that, you join and you become part of their citizen science grid. It's Wildlife at Home. Next slide. And so then I'm kind of just curious to hear, I just don't know where you guys are at. So here's a couple of polls for you. I'm curious if your intention, either in grad school or in your career at some point, you maybe hope or want to collect new data via citizen science, this kind of crowdsourcing. You can just, say yes, no, or unsure. And then the question after this is similar, but it's asking, do you have an interest in using existing data from citizen science? Because there are literally thousands of projects. You can search on SciStarter and you'll see, you'll be searching a database of several thousand projects. So there's actually a lot of data that's already available. So here for this, we have half the people think, yeah, I do want to get new data with citizen science. And there's definitely a lot of gaps that can be filled. And then the next poll is about using existing data. And I'm curious what people think there. And part of that is reflecting on when I was in grad school. I know, and actually what I encounter with my own grad students, a lot of times people want to collect their own data or be in charge of their own data. And so one of the things I like to emphasize is actually the value of the pools and pools of really rich data that already exist. But I don't want to bias your answers. Anyway, I didn't know if maybe if they're done.
Yeah, I'm going to end the poll. So last chance, get your vote in. 3, 2, 1, and poll. Share results.
Okay, yep. And it's about the same. It was like about half each time. So that's great. You can go advance my slide. I just have a few more. Because that's what I sort of like to emphasize is that with this little cartoon, it says, I think you'll be delightfully surprised by the quality of my work on this assignment. I crowdsourced it. It's something a lot of businesses do nowadays. It's really a business joke. But the point is that we really can do really powerful science through crowdsourcing, through, like I said, bringing observations together, things that scientists just can't do on their own. And there really is a data deluge. There is so much information out there that we're entering what's called the fourth or fifth, paradigm of like, it's really about how fast we can process and make meaning out of all the information that is really available at our fingertips. And so citizen science plays a really big role in that. And you can go to, I think I have just a couple more slides. And so just in terms of when you're thinking about citizen science projects from a research perspective, this is a common typology that people talk about. You'll hear there's contributory projects, and that's really where the researcher designs everything and people contribute data. And then there's these other types which are collaborative and co-created. And you can see with that, it's basically about how much of the scientific method you work to engage the public in. And if it's co-created, then you're engaging them in the whole thing. But go ahead to the next slide. In any of these, what you'll see in citizen science a lot of times are these logic models. But what I like to emphasize here is that with research, a lot of times we talk about a research question and how we want to make a discovery with it. When we talk about citizen science, we often talk about the impact that we want to make. And I think that's a really powerful way to think about your careers, is what kind of impact do you want to make? And then when you start to break that down as to what kind of outcomes you need to produce, it's probably going to involve more than just scientific knowledge. You're probably going to want to have public engagement in there, or some kind, or policy engagement. And to do that is really possible with citizen science approaches. And you can go to the next slide. Just to give a couple of shout outs, there's a lot that's been done and work that's been built on data quality. It's usually the first question that comes up. There's a lot of methods out there before, during, and after like at different stages of the project to handle data quality. It takes a lot of expertise also. What I show there on the right is the data lifecycle. It's really important when we're dealing with these large volumes of data to really know how to manage data. This becomes a really important tool that a lot of times grad students aren't taught data management, but when you get into the citizen science space, you learn it. And it's super tool to bring back even to conventional science. And you go have one more slide. And then just the other aspect that's really unique and that's multidisciplinary. Remember, that was like the theme I started with. This isn't like regular academic science work. You have to know data management, and then there's volunteer management. And really that relies on these skills of science communication and technical communication. A lot of different skills that require either interdisciplinary teams or really just like kind of jack of all trades. I think that's where I concluded, and I really wasn't keeping track of time, but I hope we're in it.
No, this is perfect because now that we've gotten everyone really excited about the possibilities, I think, so Bradley Alf is Karen's PhD student at NC State, and I think he will help you visualize how you could use this as a graduate student or as a researcher in your career. But I thank you so much, Karen, for getting us so pumped up. I loved hearing about all the possibilities. So I think we'll pass the mic to Bradley now to talk about his journey from citizen science, using data from HeartMapper to how he does research on citizen science now. So Bradley, take it away.
Yeah, thanks, Caroline. So I felt like maybe it'd be useful as it's mostly or entirely fellow grad students listening in to sort of hear my perspective sort of on how I interface with citizen science and how that's sort of changed over the course of my time as a student. And so, yeah, my first real introduction to citizen science was as an undergrad. And so I did pretty typical like ecology research on snakes. And so in particular, I was looking at how various defensive behaviors are modified evolutionarily in different snake lineages. And so essentially I was tasked with going out and bothering a bunch of snakes and filming their behavior for this project. And I became particularly interested in how this defensive behavior changed whether or not these snakes' ranges overlapped with known populations of rattlesnakes, which have a very distinct defensive behavior. And anyway, so essentially what I needed is like a very precise, fine level understanding of where rattlesnakes live in a landscape and also where other kinds of snakes live. And, if you open a field guide or something, you're often faced with very coarse maps of where different species live. And so I really needed a finer scale understanding of where these snakes were. And I found that on this citizen science project called HeartMapper, in which people from all over the world take pictures of different reptiles and amphibians that they find, and they upload those observations to a common database. And then researchers can go sort through that database and find where these records are coming from. And so it's sort of like, looking through museum specimens or something like you do in the past, but you're able to access so many more specimens and have a much easier online means of analyzing the data. Anyway, so that was my first introduction to citizen science, and I was able to use HeartMapper to inform an experiment where I was analyzing defensive behavior in areas where there were rattlesnakes and where there weren't, and that has this year finally led to a publication, which has been exciting. And so, yeah, that was my primary introduction to citizen science, was as a tool for a researcher, as an existing database or a space where you can analyze observations and use it for your research. But as Karen said, it's not just limited to ecology. I'm not sure what the fields are of everyone on this call, but as Karen talked about, there's loads of different projects out there in everything from health and epidemiology to ecology to astronomy. And so, if you're faced with a circumstance in your research where it could be helpful to have access to broad scale data about something like species abundances or where stars are or something like that, it's possible there's a citizen science project out there already collecting that data, and it can be really useful sometimes as a researcher to use the citizen science data for that, because that's primarily what it's there for. Then Caroline, you can go to the next slide. But then since coming to grad school, I've sort of transitioned away from studying ecology using citizen science to studying sort of the phenomenon of citizen science itself, which has been also interesting and another potentially fruitful area for research as a grad student. You know, you don't have to dive right into social science necessarily and analyzing why people are doing projects and things, but you can draw on sort of an understanding of what this phenomenon is, probably to understand some aspect of your research. And so, for instance, I've helped run citizen science projects. There's a group at NC State where we are that's interested in understanding the abundance of indoor arthropods, so bugs that live inside, for sort of the first really broad look at where indoor wildlife are found and what sorts of bugs spend a lot of time inside. And so anyway, we ran this citizen science project called Never Home Alone, because you are never home alone because there's bugs everywhere. And we released it onto the campus. And so we had students all over campus looking around their dorms and their apartments for different insects and arachnids and things, and actually competing. We had different dorms and students competing to see who could find the most species or the most number of observations. And that was a lot of fun. And so, we were able to help a research team here at NC State that wants to know more about this ecological question of indoor biodiversity. But we were also able to evaluate the students that participated in this project and see how this experience impacted them. And we did find, to some extent, that students, particularly students from non-science backgrounds, had some gains in interest in science and things like that as a result, correlating with participating in this project, which was neat to see. And then where the direction of my research now is heading in is, studying citizen scientists in sort of a holistic sense and understanding who the people are that are taking, lots of time out of their day to volunteer, essentially as scientists. And, as Karen talked about, there's groups that can get really competitive about these projects, none of which they're getting, none of the distributed computing groups, for instance, are getting paid for their work. But they get really interested in the project and interested in contributing to the project. And so I think it's just an interesting phenomenon to understand in general is why these people are doing this, but also what the impact is. And so I'm interested in plugging in audiences with citizen science projects that might not have otherwise joined citizen science. And so we're working with corporations, potentially like church groups, and other organizations that are interested in volunteering sort of more broadly and offering an opportunity for them to volunteer specifically through citizen science. And I'm interested in understanding how that experience might impact people, who might not have otherwise gone out, for example, and gone bird watching, but are confronted with the opportunity to do so through their work or through a community group they're involved in. And I want to know how that experience impacts them, and in particular, whether plugging groups like that into these kinds of projects can impact how they think about the environment. So yeah, in summary, citizen science is a neat emerging field in a variety of ways, and I think can be useful for graduate students to know something about and even to participate in, whether that's by using data for your research or just understanding that this is sort of a growing phenomenon that is touching all aspects of science. And yeah, that's basically my perspective.
Yeah, I love these two examples you brought up because so like on the left side, have you seen this bug? So this mug shot of this bug that you all see, it's an indoor arthropod. And the angle I really love and how I thought it was so clever in Bradley administering it is students at NC State were able to take pictures of the indoor biodiversity they encountered in all sorts of different places, be it their dorms or their off-campus apartment. And it was just very fun. And Bradley was able to use existing tools to make it happen. So NC State has a microsite on SciStarter. So he was able to promote it through the 1.0 version of the NC State microsite. It was also searchable in SciStarter's public project finder, so other people, you know, in the Raleigh area could discover it. Bradley was able to write about it for the SciStarter blog, and also we published it on Discover Magazine's website. So there's a lot you can do if you're interested in administering your own citizen science project. He ran it through iNaturalist, which is an existing platform. And if all of this sounds foreign to you all, and you're like, what are these projects? What are these words? I'm going to share my screen in a second and kind of walk you through SciStarter for just a sec before I pass the mic to Darlene and Darren. But you can investigate, and there's a lot of tools you can use if you have a research project you're really interested in setting up and getting members of the public to become citizen scientists to collaborate with you. And then the image that Bradley had on the right, which I think is a really key example as well, is from SciStarter's microsite with Verizon. SciStarter is a volunteer partner with Verizon, so for certain projects that have opted to go this extra mile, so there are thousands of projects, events, and tools listed on SciStarter, and it could be a little overwhelming. So a few hundred of those projects have become SciStarter affiliates, meaning that not only can people discover these projects on SciStarter, but they can also track the number and frequency of their contributions to these projects in their SciStarter dashboard. So for the vast majority of projects, you go somewhere else to do it after you discover it on SciStarter. So Stall Catchers is a key example. It's a gamified research project where you classify blood vessels as stalled or flowing. So if you search Stall Catchers on SciStarter, you find it, you click the button to join it, it would take you over to another platform to participate and start conducting that data analysis, you know, while also hopefully having fun. But because Stall Catchers is a SciStarter affiliate, if you sign up for your Stall Catchers account with the same email you use to sign up for SciStarter, everything seamlessly tracks in the background in terms of your participation statistics. So this is really helpful for a group like Verizon because they're able to see, oh my gosh, this many of our employees made this many contributions at this time. Aren't we amazing? We've volunteered so much to move science forward. So these are things you all could do too if you're administering a program. And I think Bradley's research is so cool is that he's been surveying these Verizon volunteers to understand the impact of their experience and what becoming a citizen scientist has meant to them. And I know some of you may not become academics, or you may not even have a job one day that has a research component. You can become citizen scientists yourselves. I'm a citizen scientist. I do it in my free time for fun. That could be you as well. So it's really a whole world out there, and there's something for everybody. So I'm going to exit the screen really quick and just go to scistarter.org. I'll pull this out. So that's the core of the website. You'll make an account. You'll use the project finder to search for different things. And if you're intrigued by the idea of these affiliate projects I mentioned, you actually have the option to only search for SciStarter affiliates. And let's say that I just really love space. I can search for SciStarter affiliates that are all about space. And maybe I want to do it with my grandparents. And my family and I were social distancing, so I want to do it with my grandparents online. Oh my gosh, I think I found the perfect project. I'm going to measure the curvature of spiral arms and galaxies. How cool. And if you ever want to add a project to SciStarter, if any of you end up coming up with a project, event, or tool that you want members of the public to know about, you can add it here at scistarter.org/add. So I just wanted to show that to you all before I pass the mic to Darlene. She's going to talk a little bit about all sorts of different things that are relevant to you. We definitely don't have enough time to cover it all, so I encourage you all to do further reading, but Darlene's going to talk about grants, broader impacts, and program management. And then Darren Ash, her colleague at Arizona State, is going to add to that as well. So we'll let Darlene start it off.
Great, thank you. And I love the presentations from Bradley and Karen. And Bradley, thank you for my background. And Caroline, thanks for helping to organize all this. So thank you, Caroline, for describing what SciStarter is and how it can help you find projects to engage in, and can also serve as a platform to help you recruit participants. So if you down the road, or maybe you already have, a burning research question that you can't answer alone, and for all the reasons that Karen and Bradley and Karen just showed you, would benefit from a crowdsourced approach, I would recommend first that you look around for a project that might already be addressing the question that you're trying to research, because it's very likely there's already a project that exists. There's a couple thousand on SciStarter already. But if not, there are other best practices and toolkits that you can look at. One is on citizenscience.gov, and maybe Caroline can put these in chat for us while we're speaking. Citizenscience.gov is a federal community of practice, and they've come up with best practices for creating your own projects. And they also list some free tools that you can use. And also the Citizen Science Association, so citizenscience.org. Has a whole suite of resources that you can look at as well as you're thinking about creating a project. I just put a link in chat. Hopefully everybody can see it. This is also a place to turn to for financial support and grants. So this is the National Science Foundation, which has funded quite a bit of SciStarter's work and my work at Arizona State University, where I'm with the School for the Future of Innovation and Society. We collaborate on a number of grants with North Carolina State University as well. So Karen and her team look at the movement and the behavior and the learning outcomes of participants who are engaged in projects. My work at ASU looks at how we can support facilitators to introduce more people to citizen science, whether that's librarians or Girl Scouts or educators or other communities that help facilitate the practice of citizen science and crowdsourcing in their communities. This link to the NSF is just by me typing in the words citizen science in funding search opportunities. And you can see there's a lot that the NSF offers in support of citizen science. And that's just one of the federal agencies. There's something like 48 federal agencies that support citizen science. So this is one, NASA is another, and National Institutes of Health. I'm sure I'm forgetting some big ones. NOAA, National Park Service, dig around and even just do simple Google searches for citizen science grants. Private foundations support this too. And in all different ways. So some of the grants may support you as a graduate student to create a project. Maybe it's a local project that you can do on and around campus. Bradley gave us some great examples of that, and other examples of how he as a graduate student uses citizen science to advance his own research. Others might fund you to develop new tools. There's a social science component of citizen science that's really important. That's a lot of what our work is again, studying the social side of this as well. And so I'm gonna pause there. You'll see in some of the grant descriptions how citizen science can really fit into the broader impacts as well as the intellectual merit of it. But what you don't want to do, warning, is to think about citizen science strictly as broader impacts. So, this is how you're going to do your outreach. You're going to teach people, you're going to educate them about what you know. That is not what citizen science is. That's great for STEM outreach, but really, it's to address issues that you cannot answer on your own. So you need people to help you answer a question. That's citizen science. You're actually learning from the volunteers. So it's a reverse kind of broader impact. It's their impact on you in some ways. So that's a really important thing to consider. I don't know that we got into the audiences yet, but typically citizen science is well suited for 13 and older, mostly because of online privacy acts. So if you need to reach out to a volunteer who submitted data and you needed that person to share email address or an account, it's better to have that from 13 and older. Ideally, it's actually 18 and older, because you may want them to also sign waivers, or they may need to sign off on something, consent forms for your IRB. These are all really practical considerations that you're going to need to account for. But then the sky's the limit. This is including senior citizens. But as you're developing a project or facilitating a project, you just want to think about who your ideal audience is. And some projects may be too technical and too complex to introduce to people who aren't comfortable with, lots of different interfaces. Karen gave us some great examples of people who are comfortable with technology. Those gamers, people who are kind of using supercomputers and want to form these hubs. You may not find too many of them in the senior citizen population, but what you will find in the seniors population are very dedicated, very persistent volunteers who will day in and day out provide you with data. They're looking for social connections. So again, part of what the literature will provide you with is different types of motivations that people have for their reasons for getting into citizen science. There's no one motivation. Kind of depends on the project. If your loved one's life is at risk because they suffer from Alzheimer's, your motivation to get involved in the project that is Caroline's background there, which is called Stall Catchers, is very different than somebody who's just, curious about bluebirds. So motivations change over time, but I think the big point here is that there is something for everyone. There are resources out there to support you. If you're faculty tuning in here too, there are ways that you can incorporate citizen science into your courses. Karen showed us that there's basically not a topic that can't be that citizen science isn't addressing. So, it could be an English topic. I think actually NC State had an example of English teachers inviting students to also engage in a citizen science project and write about their experiences. And SciStarter can help you with that too, just whittling down, finding the right project, making it clearer to your students what you want them to do, and also keeping track of that through basically measuring collective impact, because we can tell you how frequently people are contributing to the projects that you've assigned to. What we won't get into here are some of, maybe Caroline can pull up that screen that we have for NC State, and we have a similar one for ASU. But it might be something that we look at doing with Michigan. If there are enough faculty members who want to assign citizen science projects, we can help you curate them, put it up on the screen. Put it up on a site, have step-by-step instructions. There's a plug and play introduction to citizen science. I would actually encourage you all to take a look at that. Each one of those are projects that NC State selected. They have surveys at the end of that. They post their events that are there. So there's a lot of ways that we support universities and schools. I'm going to pass it over to Darren because we only have 6 minutes. Thanks for pulling that up, Caroline.
Yeah, really quickly, for those who think, oh, my time in graduate school is futile, just know that Darlene founded SciStarter when she was a graduate student. So there are big things in store for you all.
Thank you.
I'll let Darren speak about the program management side.
Great. Thank you. So again, my name is Darren Ash. I'm at ASU at the School for the Future of Innovation and Society. And I mostly work in research advancement and administration. So I'm able to contribute to the subset of research portfolios that we have that are around public engagement research. In this case, in the citizen science realm, most of them having to do with projects that Darlene is the PI on. And so I'm able to contribute in a few different ways here. Mostly, so I can kind of break it down into pre-award and post-award activities. And the pre-award is basically helping our team pull together things like the grant. So when there's a request for proposals from various federal agencies, we've worked with, as Darlene had said, the National Science Foundation, but we worked with the National Libraries of Medicine and the Institute for Museum and Library Services, I think it is, IMLS, NASA, and as well as philanthropic organizations. And the idea there is, of course, just to as kind of a project manager, is to move the process along and make sure that the team gets a proposal in by the deadline that you need to get it in by. That's first and foremost what has to happen, or you've missed those grant opportunities. But aside from that, it's mostly pulling together the documentation, getting things like the narrative for the grant pulled together, and all the ancillary docs. So that things like the bio sketches, current and pendings, which show the kinds of other projects that that researchers are working on. So all that has to be pulled together with a project budget and with a budget narrative to explaining what's in your budget. So all that has to be pulled together and put into the portal that the agency is using, and that's hopefully, if everything is done the right way and done according to their procedure, in no time at all, you have money in the bank to go do your research. So, and I won't spend a lot of time on this because we're kind of short on time here, but, I work a lot with the budgets, and that's basically trying to figure out, okay, how much are we going to, set aside for paying the researchers, including the faculty and the students that are on this project. There may be money for travel if you need to go out into the field or have meetings, but, for the project team. There could be money for other direct costs, things like equipment, the tools you might need for a citizen science project, software, so software development. Maybe you're looking to develop an app that'll help the project. You need to hire a developer to do that. And so you need to kind of budget for things along those lines. So our project, many of the projects that we're on are not actually doing citizen science. It's kind of making citizen science more accessible to a broader audience. So, some of the things that we needed to spend money on are things like library kits. And so in our case, I was able to, on the project management side of my activities, help create some of the kits that we have on loan at libraries, which make the projects in those citizen science areas more accessible. So again, to a broader audience. Sometimes there are tools that people need to use for that project that they don't own. And it would be awful nice to be able to go to the library and go and check out a kit that has that tool so that you can actually engage in that project. And for instance, I have the opportunity to create one of those kits. And in that process, you have to think through very carefully as to for instance, what's in that kit. It may be the tool that's needed. For instance, in the kit we did for observing pollinators, we wanted to put a pair of binoculars in so that people can get a close-up look at a bush or with some flowers and be able to make sure that they can identify the pollinators that are actually that they're supposed to identify for that project. But then there's also things like, hey, the people might need a clipboard or a data sheet, a marker, the cloth that the people might need to clean their binoculars with. So it's just kind of the process of thinking through the various things that a citizen science might need to conduct this research. Let's see, I think we're just about there on time. Do I have one more minute or?
Yeah, let's take one more minute. And I know that this is, we wish we could stay longer and talk to all of you longer, but hopefully this was a tantalizing hint. And my office hours are open to you all every Thursday. I'm going to put the link in the chat to get those in case any of this, sparks something in you and you want to learn more. You can join my office hours each week and we can talk about all your ideas, plans, schemes. But I'll let Darren have his last minute.
Sure. I guess the only other thing that I'm involved with recently, which kind of similar along the lines of developing a kit, is working on an analysis of the kinds of skills that people utilize when they're doing citizen science projects. So it basically has to do with project design and the process skills that you have to kind of think about when you're developing your own citizen science project. So, thinking through, what am I asking of, these people, these volunteers going out in the field? They're going to have to do observation skills. They have to identify things or classify things or describe things, or to recognize patterns. How are they going to report data? Do they, is this numerical data? Do they have to upload photos? Do they have to upload audio files? And making sure that people know how to do that. You have a broad range of people that are volunteering for these projects, and some parts of your population may not be as familiar with uploading a photo as others. So really thinking through what it is that you're asking, and making sure you have the proper training and the proper information, so that they can develop skills that they might need. So that's that in a nutshell.
Good stuff. All right. Well, I know we're out of time, so I don't want to keep anyone any longer. But if you have any questions, send them to the email in the chat. It's info@scistarter.org. And if there's a panelist by name, so if you have another question for Darlene or Darren or Bradley or Karen, wow, everybody's names kind of rhymes. That's nice. Very musical. But if you have any questions for anybody, just email the info@scistarter email address, and I'll make sure it makes it to the proper recipient. Any other closing thoughts from our panelists? And thank you to Susie Taylor from Montana State University for organizing this. You graduate students have a big advocate in her. She's looking out for you and making sure this knowledge reaches you.
Yeah,
And
thank you to all of you. I really appreciate the awesome panel that you put together I saw some students from other Montana universities too, which is excellent. So thank you so much to everybody for the great workshop.
Awesome. All right. Well, bye everyone. Have a good night. And I guess a good afternoon to our friends in Montana and Arizona, but talk to you all soon.
Bye. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.